There was a time when AAA meant innovation. There was a time when AAA games did not seek to have mass market appeal. And there was a time when AAA meant quality. 3D Realms was one such AAA developer. They were always pushing the envelope with what they could do. Duke Nukem 3D was extraordinarily popular because it tried to do something different and succeeded. And so in 1997, 3D Realms decided to push the envelope yet again with Shadow Warrior. Who want some General? Oh, 1997 was a damn good year for first-person shooters. Shadow Warrior, ladies and gentlemen, was Duke Nukem 3D on steroids. Or possibly magic space steroids that don't give you shrunken testicles and heart problems.
Holy cow! Look like Duke Nukem!
3D Realms chose to stick with Ken Silverman's build engine, and instead of going full 3D, they instead stuck with 2D with a few 3D voxels here and there. I think this was a great idea all around because the vast majority of early 3D games look like shit, and games like Quake, Quake 2, and the Turok games are exceptions to this rule. Sticking with 2D allowed them to make some really complex and really expansive levels filled to the brim with details. And also, by sticking with 2D, the game has been able to age rather gracefully. The late 90s was still very early days for 3D. What looked good in 1997 would be laughable today. But 2D has managed to stand the test of time. As for me personally, I recall that back in the late 90s, I was not all that receptive to 3D. I felt that 3D games lacked the graphical prowess of the earlier 2D games. And for the time, 2D games were capable of greater levels of detail compared to their 3D counterparts. The 3D voxels that this game has really blew my mind back in the day. Initially, they were not even activated by default. And one day, while playing around in the options menu, I accidentally enabled them, not knowing what I was really doing. And when I got back into the game after enabling them, I was shocked and agog at the 3Ds! The keys and the weapon models and other assorted gubbins look quite good in 3D and really serve to spice up the game. The game, like Duke Nukem, is really quite difficult, almost to blood levels. You will need to quick save all the goddamn time, and expect to give heed to the great space battleship Yamato every time you find an aid kit or a health pack. The game is really tough even on the second difficulty setting. There are numerous enemy types, each with their own abilities, and I was blown away by all their frames of animations. And some enemies are able to use multiple types of attacks. Case in point, the basic Demon Ninja. He can shoot you with an Uzi, throw shurikens at you, and also kill himself. Yes, this game had a rather interesting sense of humor, and those behaviors are from just one bloody enemy. Now the game does suffer from guys in differently colored clothing syndrome. In this game, it's actually not differently colored shirts, it's differently colored shorts! The power level of the Demon Ninjas is determined by the color of their shorts. And these basic Demon Ninjas are tough bastards. The weakest can still shred you with his Uzis, and the strongest can one-hit kill you with a massive explosive attack. The game also features a suicider enemy. This green cretin that runs around with a massive box of TNT. He is not a one-hit kill if you have full health, but he does drain a lot of health if he blindsides you. But it gets better. Or worse, depending upon your mindset. After he dies, he comes back as a ghost. He shoots a red plasma shot that can do a tremendous amount of damage. Then, you got Evil Shrek. He can shoot flames out of his eyes that, while not a one-hit kill, can still hurt bad. The only consolation is that you can cut its head off and use it as a weapon. But the great can of Surge, do I miss the 90s? Another enemy of note is the She Ninja. She can toss sticky bombs that can really mess up one's day, and can snipe you with a crossbow. And also, she's really quite hot indeed. The game also features a number of bosses as well, and they're usually fought in fairly nice arenas. Be proud, Mr. Wu. Time for weapon review. My favorite weapon as a kid was the sword. This to me was the most awesome weapon of all time, and it can do a shit ton of damage if you can get close enough to slice and dice. The effect of slicing the enemies in half is nothing short of exquisite. Then you have the Fists of Fury. Lo Wang can beat the shit out of just about anything if you can get close enough, and you can refill health if you beat up on the practice dummy. The first bullet weapon you get is the Uzi. It's got decent range and damage, and the sprite is just transcendent in its details. Then there is the multi-barreled riot shotgun that is as useful as one would imagine, and is often used in Doom WADs. Then there is the grenade launcher. I didn't like it much back in the day because I always blew myself up with it, and in the modern era I keep blowing myself up with it. Looks like I haven't learned that much since 1997. The rocket launcher has got to be one of my favorites in FPS in general. It looks cool, it sounds cool, it has 3 firing modes, standard, heat-seeking, and nuke.
3, 2, 1. All systems ready.
Peace!
Warning.
It's positively orgasmic, and it even leaves a little poison cloud to represent fallout. Then there are the sticky bombs, and they are a decent grenade weapon, but there is always the chance that you will blow yourself up with them. As mentioned earlier, you have the severed head of Demon Shrek, and it has 3 different firing modes, each of varying utility. Also, you gotta love how well detailed Lo Wang's hand is here. And then there is the Railgun. It does good damage, it sounds and looks cool, and is absolutely useful. The last weapon is so creative, it's amazing. When you blow up these giant wolf beast griblets, they will sometimes leave a heart behind. If you squish it, a Shadow Wang appears. Oh dear. And he will go on a penetration rampage, killing all within sight. These weapons are excellent all around and feel very powerful, and they are just really creative. They didn't stick with the pistol shotgun rocket dichotomy and actually innovated. Back in Duke 3D, I thought the weapons were pretty boring. Here, they have more than fixed that. Like in Duke, you can get some items, different grenades, health kits, and of course, caltrops.
Who put these here? Ow!
The game also introduces vehicles. Needless to say, young me and myself were quite blown away yet again. Vehicles in 1997. When I played it, I had yet to play any first-person shooter where you could actually use one. Running over ninjas in a machine gun armed forklift was bloody epic both back then and now. The vehicles in the game are quite impressive for the time. However, since this is still the build engine, you will not be able to drive them very far. The gameplay is not quite what you would expect. At first glance, this is just an Asian version of Duke Nukem. But in all reality, it's more like Asian Hexen. In this game, you have a bunch of key hunts, and many ways to progress are hidden behind hidden doors. Meaning you're going to be grinding all over the walls trying to find where you need to go. The shooting is actually a little more fun than Duke Nukem's, but the game really has a focus on exploration. This is both good and bad. Good in that you feel accomplished when you finally find that bloody key, or press that bloody button, or finally discover that door that you never would have thought would have been there. But it can get discouraging when you start a level only to be stumped as to where to go from the get-go. As a kid, I had even less patience than I do today, so I often pressed T and then SW Ghost or SW Greed. and just said screw it and cheated my way through. If you don't like cheating, like I do, there will be parts of the game where you will need a walkthrough if you want to actually make any progress. I respect 3D Realms in trying to make the levels themselves a challenge, but seriously, y'all could have just been a little more merciful. Unlike with Duke, this game was not ported to every console imaginable and remained quite properly a PC exclusive. I still have my original copy, but I ain't digging through that legit DOS box, and as a card-carrying member of the PC Gaming Master Race, I have two different versions of the game, the GOG version and the Redux version off of Steam. Almost all the gameplay seen in the review is from the Redux version, as it's the easiest to get working, and out of the gate, you have modern controls and screen resolutions. The GOG version is not as easy to get working, but it's still doable. Now, I highly recommend the Redux version just for the ease of use, although the Redux version is a little more buggy than the GOG version actually is. Also, unlike with Duke Nukem Megaton Edition, the Redux version of Shadow Warrior does not have co-op, meaning you're still going to have to use the original DOS version to actually play it cooperatively. Music is not altogether memorable. In fact, from 1997 to now, I had long forgotten the title track, which actually sounds quite good, although not quite as good as Grab Bag. The rest of the tracks are generally just atmospheres. Nothing really stands out that much, and honestly, when gathering footage for the review, I didn't really notice the music at all.
Between the time when John Romero made us his bitch and the rise of Bungie, there was an age undreamed of. And unto this, Lo Wang, destined to wear the jeweled crown of the PC Gaming Master Race upon a troubled brow. It is I, his chronicler, who alone can tell thee of his saga. Let me tell you of the days of high adventure.
In Duke Nukem 3D, all you had for story was alien bastards shot up your ride, and now you're gonna get revenge for your ride getting shot up. In Shadow Warrior, the story is concise, but gives a great amount of flavoring to the shooting and exploration. You are Lo Wang, a super ninja known as a Shadow Warrior. You once worked for Zilla, the head of a Japanese megacorp, and he dabbles in the dark arts and decides to test his demon ninjas on you. Lo Wang, not liking this, decides to leave Zilla's employ. This, of course, does not please him at all, and when you start the game, this happens.
Zilla sends his regards, Lo Wang. You're no mess with Lo Wang.
Simple and concise. You know who you are, who you're fighting, and not a single word or action wasted.
Lo Wang even gets some backstory in the game. You go to Master Leap's temple and you find him killed by Zilla. You now know that Lo Wang had a master and that he actually cared about him. No word or action wasted. The game itself is a gameplay game, and a tongue-in-cheek one at that, but 3D Realms respected its audience enough to add a story and story details anyway. And this, of course, makes the game world feel that much more alive. Lo Wang himself is, in my opinion at least, even cooler than Duke Nukem and has some really funny lines throughout the game, and is even more raunchy than Duke Nukem as well. But it never gets annoying, and they never overstate the joke. The whole game can be seen as a tribute to the legendary John Carpenter film Big Trouble in Little China, as it has the same vibe, and I feel that Lo Wang is a more raunchy version of Egg Shin, and Lo Wang more than earns the right to stand with other FPS giants like Doom Guy and Duke Nukem himself. The franchise would be rebooted properly in 2013 with the release of Shadow Warrior 2013. Lo Wang is still awesome, and the gameplay and world is still fun and still worthy of the name Shadow Warrior.
I'm such a big fan of Shadow Warrior that I picked up both of the Shadow Warrior novels, and I highly recommend doing so because the writing is actually good and they're just as funny as the game. In the end, I highly recommend picking up Shadow Warrior, be it the GOG version or the Steam version, as both versions more or less work, and the game is definitely worth playing. And so I am GeneralLotz, wishing you good Shadow Warrior 2013 and good Shadow Warrior 2, whatever. makes you happy.
If you enjoyed my review of Shadow Warrior 1997, please consider subscribing. If you can, please consider supporting me on Patreon so that I can continue bringing you these awesome PC game reviews.